Alright, let's just do a refresher on how to find slope from equations of a line. So remember, there's two types of forms that you studied when you were in algebra. So one of them will be slope-intercept form, and remember that is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope of the line and b is the y-intercept. Remember, the y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. M is always the number in front of the x. It does not include the x. It is just the number in front of it. Okay, so let's practice finding the slope of the lines below. So for example 1, we have y is equal to negative 3x minus 4. And we want to know, well, what's the slope of that line? So remember, slope is the m, which is what sits right in front of the x. So the slope of this line is negative 3. So we know the slope here is negative 3. Alright, let's do another example. Example 2. We want to know if we have the equation y equals x plus 7. And we want to know what's the slope. And so looking at that one, remember we need to know what's the number in front of the x. Well, in this case, there is no number written here. Right? So as I'm trying to circle, there's nothing written there. But remember, when there's not a number there, it's understood to be a 1. So this has a slope of 1. Or 1 over 1, meaning it will rise 1, go to the right 1. Up 1, right 1. Up 1, right 1. Okay? So let's try another example. Example 3. We have y equals 2/3 x plus 2. And we want to know, well, what's the slope? And remember, the slope is what is sitting in front of the x value. So in this case, it is a fraction 2/3. So that means you'd have a rise of 2 and a run of 3. So here's your slope. So your slope in this case would be 2/3. Okay? And so your last example is example 4. And we have y is equal to negative x plus 12. And so again, remember, slope is the number sitting in front of the x. And so here, there's no number written, but what do we have? We just have a negative. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that it is a negative 1. Okay, so even though that number is not written, it's like example 2, this is still a 1 there, and it's a negative 1. So this line has a slope of negative 1. Okay. Alright, so hopefully you're writing this down all in your spiral so you'll have this as a reminder. Now, your next form that you learned was standard form. Remember, standard form is the ax plus by equals c. So this one is not solved for y. And your slope is equal to negative a over b, or negative a divided by b, and making sure it's simplified. And so I just kind of want to show you where that comes from, because if I had this equation and I wanted to put it in slope-intercept form, that means I would have to solve for y and try to get y by itself. So my first thing I would do is to subtract ax from both sides. Remember, you did a lot of this in your algebra class. So I'm going to subtract ax from both sides. So now I'm left with by equals negative ax plus c, because I can't put those together. They aren't like terms. I still don't have y by itself, so now I can divide this by b, which means I can divide everything on this side by b as well. Keep it all even. And so y would be equal to negative a over b x plus c over b. And so we're looking for the slope. We know that the slope is, remember, what is in front of the x when it's solved for y. And so here's your slope here, which is just the negative a over b. So kind of keep that in mind. So instead of having to solve for y all the time, if you just know that the slope will be negative a divided by b. So you take this value, a, and do the opposite sign of it over b, and that's the slope of the line. So if you have to find the slope of these lines below, here I could solve these for y and put them in slope-intercept form, or I can identify that 3 is your a value, 4 is your b value, so your slope is equal to the negative a value over your b value, which is 4. And so the slope of this line would be negative 3/4. If I look over here at example 2, your a would be a 1, and your b is a negative 5, because you always got to take the sign in front, because the standard form will be plus by. So remember, your slope is your negative a, so negative a, which would be negative 1 over b, and your b is a negative 5. Remember, we don't have two negatives, so a negative over negative is a positive. So this one has a slope of positive 1/5. Okay, so now you should know how to find the slope of a line if it's written in slope-intercept form or whether it's written in standard form. And then once you are able to find the slope with the equations, you'll be able to determine if the lines are parallel or perpendicular. So just a refresher that parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes, meaning that you have switched the sign and you flip the fraction. And if it's not the same, or if it's not the opposite reciprocal, then it's neither. Okay? And that's it. Alright, and I just wanted to kind of bring something to your memory. So I know I said that's it, but I decided against it. So just to kind of bring back to your memory, Ahoy, Vux, where Hoy stands for, you have the horizontal. So if you have a horizontal line that has a 0 slope, and it's a y equals equation. Okay? And then Vux means there's a vertical line that has an undefined slope, and the equation is x equals. Okay? And so remember, if we have to draw kind of a picture of what this looks like, if I have a graph, let's say this is at 1, 2, 3, 4, and you have a horizontal line, and let's say this horizontal line goes here. We know this line has a 0 slope, and the equation is y equals 4, because this is where it crosses the y-axis. Okay, it's a horizontal line, has a 0 slope, that's why you don't have the x part in this equation, equals, and it's a y equals, so it crosses the y-axis. Okay? And so the vux, or the vertical, again, if I have my axes, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's say I draw this. If I draw a line through here, then this equation is x equals, because it crosses the x-axis, so x equals, and where does it cross? At -4. So it's a vertical line, has an undefined slope, and equation x equals. So a horizontal and vertical line, any of them are always perpendicular to each other. So if you have a line with a zero slope and a line with an undefined slope, then those are perpendicular. If you have two with zero slopes, then those are both parallel. If you have two that with undefined slopes, those would be both vertical, and those would be parallel as well. Alright, now that's the end for real.